Welcome back, friends. You're now listening to Ideas Podcast, innovative dialogues on educational approaches and scholarship, supported by Research Hub, Faculty of Education, Simon Fraser University, where we attend to the thought-provoking research journeys and lives of graduate students and scholars. Simon Fraser University respectfully acknowledges Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, Katzie, Coquitlam, Kekite, Kwatlan, Semiahmoo, and Tsawwassen peoples, on whose unceded traditional territories our three campuses reside. Hello, listeners. Today we welcome two speakers, Amy and Chunhong, to talk about their co-authored paper, From Hero to Zero, Resettlement, Emotion, and Multimodal Pedagogy in Community-Based Adult Literacy Program. This paper has recently received Outstanding Graduate Research Paper Award from Semiotics in Education, Science, Meanings, and Multimodality SIG, standing for Special Interest Group 110, American Educational Research Association, AERA in short. Amy, first author of this article, is a PhD candidate in the Faculty of Education at Simon Fraser University. Her current research focuses on affect and multimodal approaches to adult literacy education in Canada. Amy is currently a sessional instructor working with pre-service secondary language arts teachers and serves as a junior graduate representative for AERA Division K, Teaching and Teacher Education. Chunhong, co-author, is an old friend of Ideas Podcast. He attended Ideas last summer as a PhD candidate and shared with us about academic publications. Today he comes back as Dr. Liu. Dr. Chunhong Liu passed his PhD thesis defense in April 2026. His research sits at the intersection of affect, subjectivity, and discourses in English language education. He has published over 20 articles in journals such as Journal of Second Language Writing, Assessing Writing, Language Teaching, English for Specific Purposes, and System. Welcome, Amy and Chunhong. Congratulations on your achievements.
Thank you.
To help orient our audience, could you briefly share what this paper explores?
Oh, thank you. Our paper is based on a case study of a community-based EAL literacy program. We look at how emotions are not just individual feelings, but are shaped through relationships, classroom activities, materials, and learners' lived experiences. In particular, we examine how multimodal teaching, like using images, podcast, digital storytelling, and other forms of expression can create space for hope, agency, and resilience among adult learners.
Thank you, Amy, for giving us a sense of the main focus of your paper. To build on that and provide a bit more context, what drew you to focus on adult immigrant language learners in Canada?
Thank you for this question. We know that Canada is a country shaped by immigration, but immigrant experiences are often discussed, many in economic or policy terms, for example, whether people can find jobs or improve their English quickly. What is less visible are the emotional realities behind these experiences. Many adult immigrants, they arrive with rich professional and personal histories, but after migration, they may suddenly feel invisible, isolated, or lacking confidence because of the language barrier. As immigrants ourselves, we were very touched by these stories, so our research aims to create a space where we listen carefully to each other's life experiences and recognize that emotions are not separate from education, they are central to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chunhong. Is there anything you want to add, Amy?
Oh, yes, I totally agree. And building on what Chunhong just said, we noticed that, especially for adult immigrant language learner is not about a grammar, vocabulary, or communication skills. For them, it is also connected to belonging, identity, and feelings of uncertainty. So this kind of things really helped us to see how can we better support and create a space for multiple expression.
Thank you both. Your paper explores the idea of emotions as entanglements. Could you introduce this concept to us in your own words?
Thank you for this question. When people hear the word emotion, they often think of it as something happening entirely inside an individual person. For example, we might say she feels anxious or he feels confident. as if emotions simply belong to that person. The idea of emotions as entanglements was developed by Dr. Pramod Shah and his colleagues. It invites us to think differently. It suggests that emotions are not just inside us, they are shaped through our relationships, experiences, environments, and the broader social world around us. For example, imagine an immigrant who feels nervous speaking English in public. A traditional explanation might be that this person lacks confidence, but if we look through the lens of emotions as entanglements, we would ask, what does that anxiety come from? Perhaps it is connected to past experiences of being corrected, fear of being judged because of an accent, pressure to find a job, or social messages about what counts as good English. The emotion is not simply inside the person, it emerges from the interaction between the person and their social environment. So in our study, we found many examples of this. For example, one participant held a PhD before immigrating to Canada, but after arriving, he struggled to find employment and began to see himself as inadequate because of his English. His frustration was not just about language skills, it was connected to employment systems, social expectations, immigration experiences, and his changing sense of identity. All of these factors became entangled with his emotions.
Thank you for inviting us to see emotions as relational, not just individual feelings. And the story that you provided is really profound. And I believe that a lot of international people or newcomers to Canada have similar experiences. So, what shifts when we begin to see emotions as something relational, circulating across people, materials, and spaces, rather than just individual states?
That's a really important question. I think one major shift is that we stop seeing emotions as something located only inside the individual learner. For example, if a learner feels anxious, we may not just ask what is wrong with this learner. Instead, we ask what kind of relationships, classroom activities, or social experiences are shaping this feeling. So emotions become something that moves across the classroom. They can be shaped by a peer's response, the teacher's tone, the physical space, or learners' past experiences of migration and language learning. So this also changes how we think about pedagogy. Teaching is not only about delivering language content, it is about creating conditions where learners can feel recognized, supported, and able to express themselves in different ways. This is where multimodal pedagogy becomes important because it gives learners more than one way to participate and make meaning.
Thank you, Amy. Talking about pedagogy, you explore multimodal pedagogy in this paper, which brings together visual, textual, and embodied forms of expression. What does this look like in practice in your classroom or program?
Good question. In my classroom, this looks like giving learners multiple ways to participate. For example, they might draw before writing, use photos to tell a story, act something out, or use gestures or share orally before producing written text. So when we say multimodal pedagogy, many people think, oh, maybe just add some photos. And for us, it's not just adding pictures to a lesson. It's about creating different pathways for learners to make meaning.
Thank you for explaining how it looks like in your classroom. So, one of the powerful ideas in your work is a classroom as a site of emotional relationality. Can you share a moment or example when you saw this come alive?
Oh, this is a great question. For example, one of the classes we used photos as a starting point. Learners were invited to bring their family photos or photos of places where they used to live or places that were meaningful to them. So these photos were not just about the past, they also shaped how learners talked, remembered, and connected with others in the classroom. When learners talk about familiar people, cultural practices, or places from their lives, the classroom became a more relational space. Other learners would listen and respond, ask questions, and share similar experiences. And so emotions were not simply inside one learner, they moved through the photos, the stories, the memories, and the relationships in the room. So for me, that was a moment when the classroom became a site of emotional relationality. I hope this answers your question. And also, we understand language learning was not only about learning new words, it was also about being heard and making connections through memory, history, and story.
Thank you for sharing that. According to your observation, how did learners' sense of agency or belonging shift through these multimodal and emotionally attuned practices? Your co-authored work also highlights care-oriented approaches to EAL teaching. What does it mean in practice to teach with care in these contexts?
Thank you for this question. I think my response will be related to Amy's response to your last question. So, in my understanding, teaching with care means recognizing learners as whole human beings, not just language learners. It means that we should understand students may carry stress, migration experiences, family responsibilities, or feelings of uncertainty into the classroom. A care-centered approach values listening, flexibility, empathy, and relationship building. In practice, this can mean creating opportunities for storytelling, encouraging multiple ways of expression, validating learners' experiences, and reducing the fear of making mistakes.
Thank you for this answer. So, this care-oriented approach actually involves invisible and visible efforts. I'm curious, does this project change the way you listen or notice learners' experiences?
Yeah, definitely. This project changed the way I listen to learners. Before, I might have paid more attention to what learners were able to say in English, their vocabulary, grammar, or fluency. But through this project, I started to notice the experiences behind their words and also what they express through photos, drawings, gestures, and stories. For example, when learners share the family photos or photos of places they used to live, I realized that these memories were not just personal stories from the past. They shaped how learners participated, how they connected with others, and how they made meaning in the classroom. So now I try to listen more relationally. I would say I pay attention not only to language accuracy, but also to emotion, memory, history, and the different ways learners express who they are.
So, it sounds like a co-creating process,
Mhm.
like dwelling on meaning instead
Yeah.
of just a language. Chunhong, do you want to add to that question?
Yeah, I think this project deepens my understanding of how complex these experiences can be. It reminded me that emotions are not simply individual feelings that learners bring into the classroom. They are connected to their migration histories, family responsibilities, and social expectations, and also language ideologies. So, like Amy, one thing that particularly stood out to me was how much can be communicated through modes beyond language. As researchers and educators, we often focus on what learners say, but in this project, learners they expressed themselves through images, drawings, stories, and symbols. Sometimes these multimodal expressions revealed emotional experiences that might not have surfaced through words alone. So this project deepens my appreciation for the importance of relational spaces in education. What stayed with me was the realization that learning is not only about acquiring knowledge or skills, it's about finding spaces where people feel that their experiences matter and their voices are valued.
Thank you both. So, working with emotion and multimodality can sometimes sit outside of conventional academic or policy frameworks. What tensions or challenges did you encounter, if any? At the same time, what possibilities did this open up for you and for the learners you worked with?
Yes, there were definitely some tensions, to be honest. One challenge is that emotion and multimodality do not always fit neatly into conventional learning, I would say, or policy language. So in many EAL programs, learning is often measured through visible outcomes, such as their writing skills, writing accuracy, or test performance. But emotions, relationships, and learners' sense of belongings are harder to measure. So that's a part of tensions I observe.
Thank you. And Chunhong, would you like to answer this question as well?
Yeah, thank you. I want to add one more challenge here because I feel like another challenge we encounter in this research is that learners themselves, they might feel uncertain because they are used to more conventional ideas of language learning focused on correctness. But in this project, we are promoting meaning making through multimodality rather than emphasizing the measurable outcomes. So learners in this classroom context, they might feel uncertain about what kind of learning outcome they will have after this program. However, we must understand that the entangled relationality of emotions, multimodality, and the language learning in our classroom can also open possibilities for more human-centered learning. So learners, they could connect language learning with their identities, memories, dreams, and relationships rather than treating English as only a technical skill. For us as researchers and educators, it also showed that classrooms can become spaces of healing, reflection, creativity, and community.
Thank you both for sharing the challenges. How might language education shift if emotional life were not treated as secondary but as central to learning from your perspectives?
I think language education will become more inclusive and human if we consider emotion in education. So in this context, instead of just ask how students use correct grammar, we might also consider, do students feel safe to participate? Do they feel valued? Can they express who they are? So when emotional life is recognized as central, in this context, education becomes not just about performance, but also about connection, confidence, and belonging. And for many immigrant learners, these emotional dimensions are deeply connected to whether meaningful learning can happen at all.
Is there anything that you want to share with us, Amy?
Oh, yes. I think Chunhong just provided a very insightful comment on this question. To add on to what Chunhong said, I think if emotionality were treated as central to learning, I think language education would shift from asking only, for example, what can learners produce in English to ask what conditions help learners feel safe and able to participate. So in other words, we would not see emotion as something separated from language learning, and belonging, memory, and hope all shape how learners engage with the language. For adult immigrants learners, this is especially important because language learning is connected to, as just what I said, migration, identity, family, work, and everyday life in a new place. So teaching would need to create more space for learners' stories and different ways of expressing themselves. And this also can change assessment and classroom practice. We might pay attention not only to conventional accuracy or fluency, but also agency, affect, and meaning making. So for me, this makes language education more relational and more responsive to learners' lived experiences.
Thank you. I really appreciate what both of you have shared with us. It's not only a caring step, but also a courageous gesture to embrace the uncertainty together with the learners. Thank you so much both for your time and valuable input today. And
Thank
congratulations again.
you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for
Thank
having
you
us.
for having us.